Hello everybody, welcome to another session. I am Nanda Kishore. In my previous session, I had discussed about the chapter Where There Is a Wheel written by P. Sainath. In today's session, I will be discussing about tenses. Now before I move on, let me tell you one thing. Tenses, parts of speech and articles are considered three formulas to learn basic English. Not just from examination point of view, throughout your life you need to know and master tenses, parts of speech and articles. Because as long as you are alive and as long as you speak English, you need to know these three formulas. Let us start with today's session. Tenses. Under tenses, there are three tenses. First one is past, second one is present, and the third one is future. Let us deal with each tense in detail. First one, I have taken past tense. So what is this tense and why is it so important, and why did I tell you that tenses and parts of speech and articles are very three important in your life? It's because tenses, it tells you the action, whether you have done it before, whether you have done it now, or whether you are going to do it in future. When we take up past tense, under each tense there are four subtenses. First one is simple past tense, second one is past continuous, third one is past perfect, fourth one is past perfect continuous tense. In simple past tense, I learned. Now what is this I learned and what is this words? What are these words which are in red color? S stands for subject. Subject could be either singular or plural. It could be noun or pronoun. So I is a pronoun and is a subject. As I told you, subject could be noun or a pronoun. I could be replaced with Nagesh. So Nagesh learned. And what is this formula here? I have written S stands for subject plus past tense form of verb. Now the verb is in past tense. For example, if you change the example, I slept. I slept. So I is subject and just with past tense form of verb. Under the past tense, we have second subtense, past continuous tense, which is also known as past progressive tense. Now, what is this formula here? Let us take I as a subject, subject plus was or were plus verb plus ing. Just like mathematics, even in English, we have formulas to learn tenses. I, if you observe, is a subject. Was or were, depending on singular or plural, we will use was or were. Now, if you ask, sir, what is was or were? It is called auxiliary verb, also known as helping verb. Auxiliary verb, also known as helping verb. Was or were, verb plus ing. If you see this base form of verb plus ing, you need to mark these auxiliary verbs very carefully, because as auxiliary verbs change, even the tense will change. Under the past tense, let us move on to third subtense, past perfect tense. Now subject plus had plus V3, we call it V3. I had learnt. I have taken the same verb, here, and if you observe, only the auxiliary verbs play a key role in tenses. I had learnt, add plus V3. What is this V3? First form of verb is learn, second form is past tense, third form is past participle. If you see past participle, I had learnt. Let us change it to eat. Now if you take if you change this main verb, I had eaten. First tense form of eat is eat. Second tense form of eat is ate. Second tense is past tense. Third tense form of verb V3 is eaten. Eat, ate, eaten. Sleep, slept, slept. Cook, cooked, cooked. Cut, cut, cut. So V3, we are going to follow V3 in perfect tense. Don't forget it. I have told you, as the auxiliary verbs change, so will the tenses. And the last form is past perfect continuous tense. We are going to club both of these and make it the third one. I had been learning. We are going to add another auxiliary verb here to mark perfect continuous. If you don't had been here, what happens? I had learning. It doesn't make any sense. And if you add been to indicate past perfect continuous tense, I had been learning. So this becomes subject plus had plus been plus verb plus ing. You need to know this. Subject plus was or verb plus verb plus ing becomes continuous. Subject plus had plus been plus verb plus ing becomes perfect continuous tense. Now let us move on to present tense. You need to remember one thing. Mark these words which are in red color, because these words play a key role in tenses. Simple present tense, as I told you, subject, S stands for subject, plus present tense form of verb. I learn. If you observe, past tense, simple past tense, I learned becomes I learn in present tense. Now present continuous tense, I, she, they, these are subjects. So these are subjects and these are auxiliary verbs. While making sentences, I am learning, she is learning, they are learning. So depending on the subject, depending on these words, depending on these subjects, we are going to use or make use of am, is, are, which are nothing but auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. Present perfect, as I told you, in past tense, observe the words here, had becomes have in present tense. In present perfect tense, I have learned, but in past tense, I had learnt. Nothing else changes. You need to observe the subject remains same and the verb remains same. Only thing is that had, which is auxiliary verb, changes. Likewise, in past tense, I was becomes is, am, are. So was or were becomes is, am, are in present tense. I told you, if you observe subject and continuous form of verb will never change. Only thing that changes is auxiliary verbs. So this will indicate whether the action has happened before or whether it is happening now. Now, present perfect continuous tense. I told you we are going to club both of this and change it to present perfect continuous tense. I have been learning. If you just go back to the previous slide and check past perfect continuous tense, I had been becomes I have been. So here subject plus has or have. So depending on the subject, I have been learning, she has been learning. But in past tense, no matter what the subject is, auxiliary verb remains the same. She had been learning, they had been learning, I had been learning, you had been learning. But when it comes to present tense, as the subject changes, so will the auxiliary verbs. So keep that in mind. Let us move to future tense. Here, only thing that we need to add is will. I will learn. So I learn is simple present tense, but in future I will learn. You need to make use of this auxiliary verb again. So I will indicates the action which is going to happen in future. I will learn. In future continuous, keep one thing in mind. If you see the word continuous, you need to have ing form. Ing form will indicate process or progress. Here future continuous tense, I will be learning. Keep this in mind, I will be learning. You cannot simply say I will learning. So be form is very important. Let us discuss what are the be forms later. In future perfect, remember this V3, this main verb will always be in V3, third form of the verb when it comes to perfect tense. It will never change. So I will have learnt, she will have learnt, they will have learnt, it will have learnt. Here, even though the subject changes, auxiliary verbs remain the same. You cannot say she has learnt, she will has learnt. No. If you go back here, I have learnt, she has learnt. But when you come to future perfect, no matter what the subject is, will have will never change. Future perfect continuous tense, I will have been learning. Only thing you need to add is will have here. When it comes to future, will have will be added. If you go back to present, I have been learning. So only thing which you need to have is will. So each and every auxiliary verb or helping verb will decide whether the tense is in past or present or future. So this is the slide, just have a look at it. Compare how the auxiliary verbs play a key role in all the tenses and subtenses. Just have a clear look at it. As the tense and as the auxiliary verb change, so will the tenses. So let's move on to positive and negative sentences. So before we move on to positive and negative sentences, you need to have a clear look at do form and be forms. What are do forms? There are three forms here: do, does, did. Depending on the subject, you are going to make use of do, does and did. And what are be forms? Be, is, am, are, was, were, been, being. From your examination point of view, be form is very important. Most of the times in your final examinations, you will be expecting be form questions. So be clear that you can use any of these be forms in your examinations. And if you have any doubts whether the questions will be asked directly related to be form, no, they will just ask you the sentences and give you an option with brackets be, do. So you need to be using any be forms and continue the sentences to answer the blanks. Now positive sentences. I scored well in my exams. So this is simple past tense. I scored, just forget this. I scored is simple past tense. I scored is simple present tense. Though we have a complete sentence here, it is nothing but the tense, how the tenses play a key role in your sentences. I scored, I did, it has already happened. I have already scored. I score well in exams. I still do. I am still scoring well in exam. I will score well in exam. It will indicate though you cannot score well in exams, you have the capability of learning, you have the capability of understanding, you have the capability of scoring. So you are assuring somebody that you are going to score well in upcoming exams. In negative sentences, I didn't score well in exam. You did not. Didn't is nothing but did not. I did not score well in exams. Now, I don't score well in exams or did not score well in exams is a negative sentence. And one main thing you need to observe is I scored well. Now, we don't have any auxiliary verb, be forms or do forms in between these two words here. So, scored is past tense. But if you continue this sentence, I did not score well in my previous examination. Though you are talking about your previous examination, though you are talking about the action which has already happened, remember this do form. Why is this important? Because while framing sentences or while answering your examination questions in your examination, do form, it plays a key role. Why? Because whenever you use any of these three forms, do form, I did not score well. It is not I did not scored well. No, I did not come to college. It is not I did not came to college yesterday. Whenever we use do form, main verb should always be in present tense itself. Be very particular about this. The moment you use do, does or did, any of these three, main verb should always be in present tense itself. Don't get confused and don't make mistakes while answering in your examination. I will not score well in exams. I will not score well in exams. It is nothing but in future you are telling that I don't want to score well in exams. I know I was very sick. I could not study, so I know I will not score well in exams. Now this is the example or the exercise which is taken from the workbook. Now let us see why this example or exercise is very important from your examination point of view. You can expect one such example or exercise or the question in your examination. It could be asked for 2 or 3 marks. So be clear. Now let us solve this. One day a wolf, as I told you, there are be forms you need to know, and in examination they will be giving you such questions. Be, drink. So which one to use? You cannot say one day a wolf be drinking. No, you cannot use it. And what is the first thing you need to learn before you start answering this? You need to look at it thoroughly, you need to read the passage thoroughly and then come to the conclusion. And if you ask my suggestion, in the examination this kind of questions should be answered in past tense itself. Whether it is in past tense or subtenses, it should be in past tense itself. It could be simple past tense, past perfect or past continuous. Now let us start answering this. One day a wolf, as I told you, if you don't know which tense to start with, just read the sentence without answering. One day a wolf at a stream. So you don't know whether to start answering this question from present tense or future tense or past tense. He just dash a lamb who farther down. The wolf made up. Now the moment you read this, you got to know that this sentence, the entire sentence is in past tense. So observing this, by knowing this, we have to conclude that this sentence or this passage should be answered in past tense itself. But in your examination, you need to answer this question in past tense itself. One day a wolf, be form, was drinking at a stream. So stream, a running channel, water channel. He, see becomes saw. He saw a lamb who, again be form, who was farther down. You cannot use is or am or any other things because it is wrong. It doesn't give you a complete sentence, a complete sense. The wolf made up his mind to eat the lamb, but he think becomes thought. He thought that he will becomes would. He would find remains the same. He would find some excuse for doing so. So the wolf wants to eat the lamb. He run becomes ran. He ran up to the lamb and said. Now what you see from here is very important. Why? Because we cannot use past tense form of verb while we are referring to the same words which are spoken by a person or a thing. If it is a quote or the exact words spoken by a person, we have to use present tense itself. Only with the quotes we are going to use present tense. Also with the universal truth. The sun rises in the east. You cannot say the sun rose in the west or the east. Now, we need to make use of these sentences which makes sense. Now, the lamb is saying, he ran up to the lamb. Who is he here? The wolf. So, the wolf is saying, how dare you muddy the water that I, again be form, but we cannot use was. As I told you, these are the exact words spoken by the wolf, that I am, so it is in present tense, I am drinking. The lamb replied. Now these are the words from the lamb to the wolf. The lamb, I do not see, or you can either write I don't. Do not see is nothing but don't. I don't, or do not is also fine. I don't see how that can be, since the water of the stream, again be form, is water of the stream is running from you to me and not from me to you. Be very clear while attempting the question. Just because I told you this should be in past tense, that doesn't mean all the blanks in the examination should be attempted in the past tense itself. If the words are in brackets within the double inverted commas, you need to make sure that it should be in present tense itself. The second exercise, it was a curious trunk when the lock be pressed, when the lock was, remember it is in past tense already, when the lock was pressed, the trunk would fly. The merchant's son crouched. Now there is no auxiliary verb here. Crouched inside, pressed the lock, and up, fly becomes flew. Up flew the trunk and threw the chimney into the clouds. After a while, the lower part cracked, which frightened. No need to use auxiliary verbs in examination if there are no auxiliary verbs given in the brackets. Don't use unnecessary auxiliary verbs while answering the question. Frightened him, for if it have becomes had. If it had, break becomes broken. If it had broken, remember this is past perfect. Had broken, you cannot use breaking, had been broken. No, had broken into he. Now this is very curious here, very important, very tricky question. Why two halves are given here? Will, let us change one at a time. Will becomes would, he would. Now in past perfect continuous or in past perfect, we use both halves at times. Would have had. One half will remain the same. Now let us try to remove this half here. Would had a nasty fall, it doesn't make sense. So he would have had a nasty fall. However, it descended, it came down it descended safely and he found himself in Turkey. So be clear, don't be in a hurry to attempt these kind of questions in your examination. So that is it for today's session. Let us meet again in the next session. In my next session, I will be teaching about articles and prepositions. Thank you. Have a good day.